Hey all, it's David Ducker coming back at you, and today I want to talk about kind of like planetary geography, cosmic geography. Just reading the Galarian Player's Guide by Paizo Publishing. It's a really great supplement. I'm sure I'll do a full review of it when I've read it 2 or 3 times and can do a very comprehensive review. But it does have a small section about the solar system of Galarian. And it's got some really, really good stuff in there for planetary settings. For example, one of the planets in the system is tidally locked with the sun. So one side always faces the sun, and one side always faces deep space. It didn't elaborate more on that, but it gets my wheels turning, thinking about, the scorched desert of volcanoes and sandworms and maybe an Egyptian fire giant culture. And on the other side, you've got the opposite. You've got frost giant Vikings with ice dragons and Fenris wolves. And then in this narrow little band in the middle of the planet, that's where you've got, humans and elves and dwarfs eking out a living, being constantly raided by these two factions who need to steal all their food and water to survive. So, you could run a whole campaign around that kind of idea where, we live in the land of twilight and it's this misty forest. You go too far that way, there's fire giants. You go too far that way, there's frost giants, and they raid constantly. To me, it really gets this Norse kind of feel. You've got Niflheim and Muspelheim, the fire Jotun, the frost Jotun, and you're just these primitive Viking tribes in this land of mist. You could call it Midgard, the middle world. So I think that could be a huge whole campaign. It'd be great. Gets my wheels spinning. Or you could do other things with that as well. Star Wars has a planet like that called Ryloth, and they've probably got something very different that they do with the same idea. And it's got some other interesting planetary geographies as well. One of them was an extreme elliptical orbit, where if you've got the sun here, usually planets are just in a circle around the sun. But this planet goes really close to the sun, and it's really far. And it's really close, and it's really far. So they just mention it. They didn't really elaborate on it in the book. But it gets my wheels spinning again. So you can think about a planet where, they have an ice age, and it might last for, let's say like 20 years. And then things start to finally warm up, and there's this glorious spring. And then the summer, and it gets hot. And it starts to get really hot, and then they go through like a 20-year drought. And then finally they have, this second spring come through. And it's this glorious time of rebuilding. It might last for like 10 or 20 years again. And then it starts to get into fall and the winter and another 20-year winter. And what would this cycle do to a culture and a people and a geography and a ecology of all the creatures? It really gets my gears spinning. It makes me a little bit think of like Game of Thrones, where they have the odd time frames for their winters and summers. Of course, theirs are much more randomized than an actual orbit would create. Theirs is magical, but same kind of gimmick where you have to save up your resources to last through the drought, and then save up your resources. The whole next generation, has to last these resources. You got 20 years to save, 20 years of drought, 20 years to save again for 20 years of winter, and you just repeat this. So if you got somebody who's 80 years old, they start to, recognize what's going on. And I think that could be really interesting, especially in that mode. You do flash forwards. If you play through as the player characters in the spring, and you flash forward to their children, and you play through the summer, and you flash forward to their children, you play through the second spring, and then you flash forward to their children, and you keep building this cycle up, and you tell a story based around that. You know, maybe the ultimate end of the story is they want to change the orbit so they get a normal orbit. They need incredibly powerful magic and a spell that takes generations to gather the ingredients for and to set up. Maybe you have to build temples on ley lines to finally cast it. And then it shifts the orbit of the whole planet so that, you know, they finally have this normal, predictable kind of cycle. You know, and I mean the same thing with the Midgard campaign, where you have this narrow band of trees and mist and the fire and the ice and then the sun way over here. But maybe the focus of the crux of the campaign is you want to start the world turning, you know, and you want to turn it into a normal planetary rotation. And of course, the fire giants and the frost giants think that's a terrible idea, so they're going to try to stop you. But they're, you know, they're always chaotic evil. They're, you know, these guys are like the one race that doesn't get any redeeming qualities. You know, they don't even have a Drizzt who can come forth and be a nice guy. So you can start with these interesting ideas, build a setting around it, and then change the setting. And that's what I love to do when I make campaigns, because I only run campaigns for about a year. So I like to leave them completely changed. You know, it makes it more epic. It makes it big time. I don't like the little counting every copper piece stories, and you know, it's culminates in a bar brawl with some thugs. You know, to me that's like real life. Like in real life, I'll go get in a bar brawl and run out of dollars. But I very likely I won't get this big opportunity to, you know, command armies and cast magic spells and speak with gods and you know, have all these epic encounters and adventures and travel continents. So I always try to design campaigns that are big time like that. And where the players are big time players like that. And to me, this geography really inspires a lot of that fun factor. The other mode they had that I found interesting was it was a gas giant, and one of its moons had an elliptical orbit, like that planet did around the sun. This moon did around the planet. So basically, the moon is where the players live, and it's a little bit too small to hold its atmosphere. So it's constantly venting atmosphere like a comet, like it's got this big tail trailing behind it as it orbits the gas giant. And so it starts the year off with lots of air, and as the year goes on, it bleeds off more and more and more. And then finally, it gets close enough to the gas giant that it passes through the upper atmosphere, and it catches and captures all of this air just by the force of its gravity and its velocity. So then it shoots out of the atmosphere on the other side, and it's got enough air to last one more orbit. Of course, you know, this, and the book mentions it, this is completely impossible in real physics, which to me it just thinks this whole system was created by some elder god or some great old one, you know, or some mighty spell. This whole system of the planet that goes through the atmosphere, this kind of perpetual motion machine, has been created by magic. You know, or in a sci-fi game, maybe it's been created by high tech. Maybe there's a world engine, this enormous thruster built into the moon, or a series of thrusters the size of cities that blast it out of the atmosphere again. So you could do a lot of fun stuff. And when it passes through the atmosphere, you think about the friction involved, the weather events, the storms that this would cause on both of those celestial bodies. And then you can start to think as well, the denizens of the gas giants, maybe they can cross over onto the moon just during this brief span. It might only be a week. But they can actually, the two worlds can communicate, and the sky ships can cross back and forth through these tremendous storms. It could even generate some kind of magical friction, depending on your magic system. So that's another idea that really gets my gears turning. You know, I think we've all seen like the flat planet. That's interesting. Or the snow globe, where the sky is a literal dome. Or that flat world, which has another world on the bottom. Or the hollow earth, where the planet is completely hollow, and there are people who live on the inside surface, and they have an internal sun. You know, so there are a myriad of different geographies you could play with and explore how it affects the culture. Or, you know, the famous ring world of, is it David Niven who wrote the ring world? Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure I am. But where it's just like one of Saturn's rings, but made solid around a planet, and you live on this ring, you know, and the ring has its own atmosphere. So I'd love to hear about your thoughts on what to do with some of these ideas, how you would do it, how you have done it. Please tell me if you've got a world shaped like a cube, or like a donut, or a hollow donut. I think is some Forgotten Realms city, like Sigil, I think is a hollow donut of some kind. But tell me what you've done with geography beyond that of our real world Earth, and into some of these more unusual cosmic spheres and influences. So I'm going to sign off now, but I look forward to the comments. Everybody have a good night.